Welcome to this joint online event of Eurodiaconia and the European Social Network on the future of the welfare state and the particular role of social services in it. With this event, we would like to follow up on the publication of the report of the high-level group on the future of the welfare state, which was launched a few weeks ago. And we want to present the combined perspective of the not-for-profit and public social services sectors on the importance of social services for the future of the welfare state. My name is Dansvi Wislotsky. I'm head of advocacy at Eurodiaconia, and I'm delighted to be moderating this online event today. It's great to see the large interest in this event, and I'm really looking forward to many interesting presentations that we'll hear, and also good exchanges. We have some excellent speakers and experts with us today, from our respective membership, as well as from the high-level group on the future of the welfare state and from the European Commission. We will also have at the later stage the opportunity for questions and comments from the audience. And therefore, I would just, once I open the floor, I would like you to please raise your virtual hand or post your question in the chat. Also, should you have any technical problems, please post it in the chat and our colleagues will try to help you. Having said this, I would now like to hand over to Heather Roy, Secretary General of Eurodiaconia, followed by Alfonso Lara Montero, CEO of the European Social Network, for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Anne-Sophie. And on behalf of Eurodiaconia, a very warm welcome to everybody who is joining us this afternoon. This is actually quite, I think, a momentous event, because it's the first time that that I'm aware of that the not-for-profit social service organisations and the public service organisations come together to assess and to recommend how social services can be developed as an integral part of our welfare state. We all know that often in our work we can work in silos, but actually when Eurodiaconia, who's been working on the ecosystem for social services for many years, released its high-level report on social services 2 years ago, we recognised that actually we need to be effective by working also with the public service providers. And that's how this event was born and how we have come to work with ESN to produce the set of recommendations you have today. For those of you who don't know Eurodiaconia, we're a European network of 59 organisations in 32 countries, representing over 36,000 providers of social and healthcare services on a not-for-profit Christian basis. We have been very keen and very active to see that ecosystem for social services be developed well at both European and at national, regional and local level. And today we'll get an opportunity to hear some of those recommendations that we've worked on jointly with our colleagues at ESN. And I think then it's a good moment to pass over to Alfonso. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Heather, for this intro. Thanks a lot to our colleagues in Eurodiaconia and at ESN for preparing this joint event. I'm very pleased that we are organizing this joint event representing public authorities with the responsibility for social services and social services providers. This event takes place as a follow-up to the launch of the high-level group report on the future of the welfare state that was presented to the European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, Nicolai Schmid, on the 7th of February at an event where also ESN spoke at one of the sessions focused on social services, which is one of the areas covered by the report. And as Heather was saying, less than a month after this report was published, it's very timely that we come together to look at a number of recommendations from the point of view of social services in relation to the future of social welfare. The European Social Network, or ESN, is the network for public social services in Europe with 170 member organizations in 34 countries. We organized the European Social Services Conference, and which this year has its 31st edition. and also the European Social Services Awards. Very briefly, just to set some of the context in relation to social services and in relation to the reports, I'd like to highlight three main things. First of all, that social services are very complex, with competences spread across different layers of public administration, at national level, management at regional level, funding across all levels of governance, provision, as was highlighted by Heather, by public and non-public organizations. That social services can actually be costly. And this is important because we cannot look at social services only from a cost efficiency point of view, which is how sometimes is looked at. And we saw this in some aspects of the report we're going to be looking at today. Social services are concerned with social justice, social inclusion, individual and collective social and emotional well-being. And therefore, we need to look at all sorts of benefits, not just economic benefits. And this brings me on to the third point, which I wanted to highlight at the start of this session, which is that social services are concerned with the community. And the community, in the context of systems of social welfare, care and support, refers to the cycles that surround the person and the families who are served by social services. This means that social services must not only provide relevant and individualized services in the community where someone lives, but also include community input in the building of the systems of care and support. So these are some initial thoughts that I wanted to highlight at the start that certainly will come up as we go along in the, I hope will come up as we go along in the discussion. I'd like to welcome you all, and I hope that we will have very fruitful discussions today.
Thank you very much to both of you for introducing us to the topic and also for highlighting the complexity of social services. I think this is very true. And we're going to hear more about this complexity actually now, because I will hand over to my colleagues Q and Mildred, who is policy officer at Eurodiaconia, and Ilona Bokshi, who is policy manager at the European Social Network. And they will present our joint policy recommendations on this topic. So please, Kiwon and Ilona, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Anne-Sophie, and thank you, Alfonso and Heather, for that introduction. I think it already cuts the beginning of my slides of my presentation, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to share my screen, and I really hope this works. Okay. So the first thing we want to recognize here is that the social services are a cornerstone of our social welfare systems, as already discussed by Alfonso, and they play a key role to ensure that people's social inclusion in the society. But despite this role social services occupy, we discover that they are most often underfunded. And this one of the reasons why we are having this event, because we came up with these recommendations prepared together with the high-level group for social services that we did, like an internal group for Eurodiaconia and an internal group for ESN, and they jointly looked at the current trends in the provision of services. I do not know if my slides are changing. If you can see the second slide, it's not changing.
No.
Well, I'm sorry that it's not working as planned, but just follow as I go through with the second slide. We said the social services should be priority investment to face the current challenges that Europe is going through. And when we talk about these challenges, we are looking at like the demographic change, the aging population, the COVID-19 pandemic, which exposed a lot of loopholes in social services and in the social fabric of society. We are looking at the challenges like climate change, and very recently, Russia's aggressive war on Ukraine, which has caused many people to flee their homes and their comfort zones, and are now increasing the refugee crisis that we see. And we're also looking at the challenges like the rising energy costs and cost of living that is increasing across Europe. So this makes it all the more crucial for social services to be a priority investment. In the report, we considered like the main trends that we are addressing in this report. We are looking at like the implementation of EU legal and policy frameworks. We are looking at financing because we recognize that they are often underfunded. So we're looking at financing. And our recommendations also touch on workforce shortages in the social services. And sometimes we recognize that this workforce shortages is due to diverse factors like the unattractiveness of the sector, the lack of clear career paths for people who take jobs in the social services. And we are also addressing the challenge of digitalisation in social services. We also look at the growing complexity of needs of people using social services. From our gathering, from our findings, we saw that often people's needs are not just one. We see that people who need mental care, for instance, they often maybe are facing homelessness or are faced with one other challenge. So there's a growing complexity of needs of people using social services. And with all these trends, we came up with key recommendations. The first thing that we look at is social innovation. And we see that promoting social innovation in service provision is key for the implementation of the social pillar. We recognize that social innovation needs substantial investment to ensure continuity and upskilling. The first recommendation that we came up with for social innovation is that I forgot to say this, our recommendations are addressed to both the European Commission, to national, regional, and local authorities. So the first recommendation that we came up with when talking about social innovation is that the European Commission should be able to provide incentives for investment in social services, including innovation in social services, because we see that the growing complexity needs new ways of solving these problems. They should be able to develop a coherent and regular stream of funding to ensure the scaling up of successful social experimentation and social innovation projects. So the next thing we look at, or the questions that we address, are questions related to the integration of social services to better respond to the needs. We already recognize that the social and care services and social and care users, service users are facing complex needs, and coordination of authorities sometimes are facing overlaps, and to be able to avoid these overlaps, we are advocating for a better integration of these services. So, and for this, we came up with these recommendations to support member states to prioritize investment. So the key questions on integrated social services to better respond to the needs. I already discussed about the complexity that we observe. We recommend that social and care services users, please, can you go to the recommendations, please? That the European Commission should be able to support member states to prioritize investment in the integrated provision of care. And the second recommendation that we jointly came together is that they should be able to foster improved cooperation between healthcare, long-term care, and other types of social services, so that these people can have all the care they need in one place. The next slide, please. So the other key question that we had on funding and financing is that social services, there's a need for sustainable financing to be able to guarantee the long-term care provision of social services. We already saw that it's hugely underfunded, and we are reiterating the fact that the lack of sufficient funding threatens the sustainability of care provision and other key social services in our societies. And to be able to address this question of funding and financing, we do recommend that the European Commission should be able to ensure that EU funding plays a transformative role in shaping social services and social infrastructures that is additional to national and regional budgets. And the Commission should be able to also provide guidance to member states to ensure sustainability of social services beyond EU funding. Next slide, please. Another thing or challenge that we saw was on the recruitment, retention, training, and upskilling of staff. We recognize that, please, can you stay on that slide? Thank you. We recognize that recruitment and retention of qualified staff is still a challenge, and partially because of the low attractiveness of the sector, the difficult working conditions, and the lack of defined career paths and opportunities for growth within the sector. And to address this challenge, we came up with these recommendations. We recommend that there should be a promotion of the harmonization of social services workforce qualifications across the EU to address recruitment gaps. And for the Commission, within the framework of the European semester, they should be able to issue country-specific recommendations to those countries where working conditions of the care and social services workforce need to be substantially improved. Next slide, please. And for the question of quality of social services, I'm just going to hand over now to Elona. Thank you so much, and sorry again for the technical hitches. Elona.
Elona, you're still muted.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for giving me the floor. Moving on the recommendations, indeed, we are going to highlight a few things on quality of social services. It is important to understand that the quality of social services is one of the key parts of the European social pillar of social rights and enriched by different principles. But by the time that since 2010 is the only EU guidelines that is provided by the Commission, which provide a little bit the framework how to check the quality standards, is the voluntary European quality framework of social services. Since then, we have noticed, I mean, by checking the quality of social services, we have seen that has been evolved the concept and also the standards, and therefore it needs a little bit of thinking right now to look at the standards, to look at the benchmarks, and to look to the indicators how the quality of social services should be implemented. And one last point is that what is important, what we have also seen is that from different member states, the quality and the standards vary significantly. And this will be one of our recommendations, to have not only to promote the review of this 2010 voluntary European quality framework, but also to ask the Commission and member states to have a wide principles and standards that could have a common approach at the member states level. Last but not least, is also very important to formulate clear targets and benchmark for social performance in line with the European social pillar, but of social rights, but also European semester, etc., to have a clear view on quality standards. We also need to look at the national level of what it stands to the national level policies for the question marks, and this should be in line with the review of the voluntary European quality framework. In line with the quality, I'm moving to the next point, which is key question on public procurement. The order is because also the public procurement is very key important in the quality of social services. It has to be noted that it impacts quite a lot. The new providers and the new procurements impact quite a lot the social services. So what we have seen is that, first of all, to understand that the public authority, when they do this procurement, needs to have very important, the social responsible procurement should be part of it. And then what we have seen is also that the implementation of EU rules remains very much of a challenge. Member states and whoever is dealing with public procurement hardly understand all the procedures, and there is no, and also what is important is that we put in place the principle of the lower price and quality, so the ratio good price and quality. And to that we have to that we have provided several recommendations if you look at the whole document. But as a highlight, what we want to say here is it is very important that we encourage member states at all levels to develop strategies on socially responsible public procurement, to develop criteria to better implement the price quality ratio concept, as I mentioned highly before. And last but not least is to organize joint training. This comes to the capacity building portfolio, just because we say that they lack the understanding of the procedures, etc. So, and also in the EU framework, it's not very clear how they implement things. The other important part is the active social inclusion, how to have integrated services for an active inclusion strategies. What is important is that social services play a central role in promoting social inclusion, and we have seen a combination of the minimum, for example, if you combine a beneficiary for minimum income or other beneficial packets, improves this social inclusion, and it is very much important. These are also, as usual, is the main pillar also in the social pillar of social rights. To the recommendation, we moved forward. We say that it's very important that we ensure that social services are very well equipped to support the implementation of minimum incomes schemes, and also it has to be always, it's at least in our advocacy what we promote in ESN, the person-centered approach for a social inclusion to people. So this is a highlight for this point. What is another point is ensure member states to invest in integrated support, again with the approach of the people-centered, but also to put for this is more in relation with people that lives in poverty, and this to be as a package, to be an integrated support for all the levels. Last but not least, of course, is a whole list, design and implement adequate and effective active inclusion strategies. As my colleague Kevin from Eurodiaconia said, we have divided the recommendation at EU, at national levels, to really go more into details how to provide this to the member states as well. Another important point is the deinstitutionalization. What we have seen in the latest years, it's a long-term process. Is ongoing in many countries. Some of them has done important reforms, but the lacking of finances and mostly the lacking of also the political will has not. We are still in many countries that we still have the institutional frameworks, and we would like to move away from this by ensuring that EU funding support the shift from institutional to community-based care. And this, of course, needs a lot of funding, but also, as I said, needs also a political will at the from the member states. We need to support and develop care models that focus on prevention and family support. And last but not least, to ensure again with this concept of people centered, that people live in their homes. They have the right to live in their homes as long as they wish, and we provide for community care, and we support that. And of course, as I said, it's a long list of recommendations, but the last point is on digitalization of social services. A very important point was also raised by Kewan in her presentation. The COVID-19 made us see that digitalization was very important. Of course, we saw many improvements on that. We will also hear from our representative from members from ESN members more into details what is happening in Sweden when it comes to the use of the digitalization, but with that came also some other problems of the risk of dividing, first of all, the data protection, but also the growing risk of digital divide between for the vulnerable population and people at risk of social inclusion. So that despite the fact that it has been a lot of improvement, it still needs to be continue to provide recommendation for that. And we would like one of the things, one of the key recommendations that we have highlighted is that indeed the member states, and of course with the support of the Commission and all the funding that are allocated at EU level, to continue to have a allocation for digitalization of social services, of course without losing the aspect of the quality, and this should include the modernization of infrastructure, digitalization of platforms and process, also in the decision making, etc. All what it means, all of that. And there is one other point which we cannot see it here, but it has to be also at the national level. This is mostly a recommendation for the national level for member states to appoint a special body to monitor and to check the digitalization of social services, with the idea of the data protection, with the idea, well, to have in place monitoring instruments to don't have the two concerns that I just highlighted in the other slide above. And with this, we would like both me and Kevin to say thank you. And if you have any questions, we remain at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Kiwan and Delona, and don't worry about the technical hiccups at the beginning. I think we were able to follow your presentation very well, and thanks a lot for highlighting all those important points. I think it clearly shows the complexity and the importance of social services, and also shows where everywhere social services are actually active, and the wide range of persons they are supporting. We are launching those joint recommendations today, so you will find them on our websites right after the event, and we are also going to circulate them as a follow-up to this event. So don't worry if you were not able to take note of everything, you will have the chance to read through them again, of course. Those policy recommendations are, of course, the outcome not just of our thoughts, but of ongoing consultations with our members and based on their experiences on the ground. This is why we felt that it is crucial to also give them a voice today, to give us some more insights regarding the challenges that social services providers are currently facing on the ground. So I'm very pleased that we have two presentations today. The first one from the German Eurodiaconia member, Diakonie Deutschland, and the second one from an ESN member in Sweden. So please let me introduce our two experts from Diakonie Deutschland. We have Dr. Friederike Musknuk, who is currently acting head of the Law and Economics Department of Diakonie Deutschland and has been a legal advisor there since 2000. She's an expert regarding the legal frameworks for the provision of social services, public procurement, and legal frameworks for social transformation. Her academic background is in constitutional and public law. And actually she has prepared a joint presentation with her colleague, Julia Zillinger, who has worked as an economy policy advisor at Diakonie Deutschland since 2017. And she focuses on the legal framework and financing of support to persons with disabilities, as well as the impact of rising energy costs and the inflation on social service providers. Mrs. Zillinger has a background in nonprofit economics and also conducted scientific research on social cooperatives. So dear Ms. Musknuk and Ms. Zillinger, thank you very much for being with us today and for sharing your expertise. As we have quite a dense agenda, I would like to ask you to please stick to the 15 minutes that we have agreed on, because after that I will have to cut you off, unfortunately. But please, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you a lot for yeah, first of all, for giving us the opportunity to today present our experience from the ground, from a European member and a member of Eurodiaconia. So we want to present the perspective of Germany, and as Ann-Sophie has said, that Friederike and Musknuk and me, we are working at Diakonie Deutschland. So in our presentation, we first want to give a brief overview of the background of German social welfare system, and then we want to go into the challenges for social service providers in Germany that these social service providers are facing in the upcoming years. So beneath others, this is that the social state is confronting ongoing crises. Then we also see the recruitment of workforce being challenged in the next years. And we want to go into the issues around public procurement and bureaucracy. And we will always deduct some implications on how we see that the EU could support us on implementing, on overcoming these challenges better. So first of all, Germany is a so-called social state. That means that we have, that citizens in Germany have individual entitlements to social services, which are specified in 12 social law books. And the social service provision in Germany takes place in a so-called quasi-market and is organized around the principles of subsidiarity and self-administration. That means that the service provision takes place for the state, is financed by the state, but is not necessarily operated by the state. It can be operated by other entities, either in public, by public organizations, or mostly by non-profit organizations, which the Diakonie belongs to. And among others, here you can see the 6 social welfare organizations that organized most of the social service provision. And we have also private and for-profit organizations in this market. As I said, the public is financing the social service provision, and it does so by financing through subject-related fees. This is organized through the triangular model, which I will present shortly in the next slide. Either subject-related fees or subsidies are the modes of payment by the public, and we also have some client co-payments in some sectors. With the new public management in the 1990s, private providers have entered the market, and with them came more competition and professionalization in the social service sector. This is just to have a look on our a little complex model of public financing. This is how most of the social services are financed in Germany. So we have at the top the citizen or the individual claimant. Then we also have the state or social authority as the financially responsible entity. And then we have the service provider, and this triangular model shows the flow of finances and of social service provision and contract between these different entities. If you want to find out more, maybe you can later have a look at these notes on the site. Before we go into the challenges, just to get a little grasp of the importance of the sector, just looking at the non-profit organizations, so Diakonie and its neighbors, together the 6 central associations offer more than 100,000 facilities and services, and we employ more than 1.6 million employees in this sector. And the work is carried out in, for example, childcare, care for the disabled, care for the elderly, migration and family services, and in the hospital system. Yeah, and now I will hand over to my colleague, Friederike Musknuk, for the challenges in the upcoming years.
Yeah, yes. Thank you, dear Julia, for presenting our social framework. Let us now take a look at some of the challenges that our German social system is facing just now. There are many, but I will concentrate on 3 major long-term challenges. One is social side finds itself just now in multiple crises and transformations. That's a problem because in the past, German lawmakers have always aimed at making a tight framework of social law that addresses and regulates as many problems as possible. However, such a tight system poses the question, how can it adapt itself to the unpredictable? And the unpredictable came ever since 2020 in form of 3 major crises that challenged the legal framework, and they all did from diverse angles. Coming fast after each other was COVID, rising energy prices, and inflation that set us into a continuous crisis mode with changing scenarios. And if that was not enough, the German society and social state undergoes far-reaching transformations as well that need to be addressed and managed at the same time. I guess we all know the keywords that describe them: ecological, social, and digital transformation. Adjustment and response to crisis is not easy because our framework leaves little leeway for quick adjustments. And what is more, so they have to tailor new solutions, mostly with new extra funding, and always under extreme time pressure to provide answers to questions we often hardly really understand. So the current crisis instruments often clash with existing framework. And the lesson we have to learn after 3 years of ongoing crisis is that we need a far more resilient and flexible social law. And the law must make it possible for social authorities to adapt complex regulations to changing challenges and more quickly and far more smoothly. I will try to formulate a hope and a hopeful look to the European community, how it can help. Many crises are named, harass the whole EC, and I mentioned that many of our crisis respondents work along state aid. So in the past few months, we have made very good experiences with the temporary crisis framework, and the idea is, couldn't the IEC find a way that adopts a special crisis modus that we can switch in by act of the European Parliament, and they, for a certain given time, we can moderate some of the otherwise tight regulations and be more flexible to address in the short term ongoing crises. Our next challenge is the recruitment of workforce, and Kevin has already addressed this point. And in Germany, we have, I should say, 2 developments which rather foster the shortage of social work. One is the aging population that is in increasing need of nursing care and disability aid. On the other hand, many families now depend on double income, which is difficult, which poses the question how family and work can be combined. And the answer obviously is only with a sufficient access to daycare and kindergarten places for the young children. However, social work is now in very short supply, and what you're looking at is that by now the shortage of not only skilled but any social workers is beginning to put high quality services at a real risk. There are several reasons for that shortage. To begin with, social work always is personal intensive. And what is needed is people in distress need caregivers who can take a minute to spare, the caregivers who are free to talk with the seniors they nurse and sing with the kids they attend to. They ought to have this time, but in fact, in reality, working conditions for social work are quite unattractive. The workload is high. The work environment is emotionally and physically challenging. And even tariff wages may be well above the minimum wages, but comparison to other fields of work, they are still low, too low, I should say. So Germany has tried to and to amend this, but with various steps. There has been the new public management reform in the 1990s. In 1920, there was a major reform of professional training for nursing work. In 2022, federal government passed a skilled worker strategy, and a remedy more people are looking to is the immigration of skilled work, which in order to invite people who from abroad who can help us with social work. But this is effective as it may sound. It's faced with serious problems for interested and persons and employers. There are high legal barriers. Unfortunately, there are immense bureaucratic barriers, and last not least, there are ethical questions we have to answer before we really can say immigration is the way out of all our problems, because we really must take into account what care work migration means for the countries of origin and their people. So again, how can the EC help? EC could tackle some of the residence law issues. The EC has passed two very interesting directives on the EC Blue Card and the researchers and students immigration. And our wish would be that it opens to include workers with non-academic and lesser educational backgrounds. Another point of view I would like to highlight is a discussion that has been going on in Germany with some energy. And we call it the change of residency track. That means the people who have come to Germany but, seeking asylum, but not qualifying for asylum, might change their application for and register as labor migrants. It would be interesting to discuss whether such an opening might be included in the Central European Asylum System too. And EC having broad competences for labor law might do something there too. A possible starting point might be the reactivation of skilled workers from retirement. Let me look at the last challenge, public procurement. It already has figured prominently in Eleanor's report. In Germany, Julia has already presented one of the alternatives German social law has in store for securing social services. It's the triangular social law relations. Other models can be public funding, open house contracts. At the end of the day, social law decides when and whether social services are to be organized by public procurement. And it takes its pick. There are areas when public procurement is either mandatory or excluded. And sometimes social law puts the decision of the authorities how they want to proceed. Public procurement is not only for social services faces, however, a serious challenge. Procurement law may long since have opened up for sustainable public procurement. However, to implement it means changing the whole attitude of public procurement. I think that is something Eleanor has already addressed too. The EC as well as German federal administration have provided many useful guidelines and advisory boards, and they are very eager to support this change. But as I've said, it is a change of attitude, and attitudes melt slowly. However, in practice, even with all that help, there are some stalling factors I would like shortly to name here. Contracting authorities find often very little political support for sustainable procurement of social services. Far more, they are admonished to use public procurement as a means to trigger a cost competition and lower the costs for social services. Many contracting authorities cling to the easy open procedure and the criterion of the lowest price because they simply fear mistakes and delays due to legal actions. Last not least, many authorities fear to be rebuked by controlling authorities because of unnecessarily expensive procurement. So how can the EU help? I can only say we also say thank you to the EC for providing so many helplines, guidelines, programs. Still, I think there is one point I would like to mention here. When it comes to sustainable procurement, there's one major point, that's the recognition of tariffs. That is more, however, the so-called Rufford addiction of the ECG comes in. My plea would be to the EC to open up the legal framework of this legislation, that jurisdiction. That this might take the edge off many procurement outcomes that look for the cheapest price. Instead of making the payment of tariffs a private luxury of bidders, it would not only give such employers who pay tariffs a much better chance in competition. It would improve the working conditions in social work, and again, to contribute to overcoming my challenge number 2 as well. That is a very brief summary, and look to our agenda. I would like to make a point here and say thank you for my colleague who has introduced the first points, and to you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much to both of you, and also thank you very much for keeping to the time. And so, I mean, you managed to provide us so many interesting insights, and it's yeah, really good to have you with us today as experts of the ground who know the national situation extremely well and are really able to give very detailed recommendations up to the EU level. It's yeah, thank you so much. Following from here, I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, who is Graham Owen, who is a former director of social services in Sweden and currently represents the Swedish Association of Social Services Directors on European matters. He is a member of the board of the Central Association for Social Work in Sweden and of the European Social Network. He has worked in social services in the UK, the US, and since 1988 in Sweden. It's quite interesting because I think both interventions are very complementary. Mr. Owen is going to focus on the digitalisation of social services and the effects that this is bringing. And yeah, Mr. Owen, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your insights. And again, also like you to please stick to the 15 minutes. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much. The first most important thing is to try to share the screen. Is that okay?
No, we cannot see it. Donata or Jana, can you maybe help?
Yes. We cannot share it, but should be a button. Okay, now, yes.
Now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to get into the start here. Okay, yeah, as the introduction said, I'm a former social work director, social services director in Sweden, and I still work with the Association of Social Services Directors, focusing on European matters. Just a little word about the Association of Directors in Sweden. This is the directors of public authorities. Sweden, social services in Sweden is organized on the basis of municipalities. There's 290 municipalities in Sweden, from very small, maybe just a few hundred people living in some municipalities, to very large municipalities. So there's a sort of a strange, there's a structure that is quite challenging in the country. The association works on trying to influence legislation, influence social policy. It's independent, but is made up of public authority directors. Social services legislation, there's one legislation that covers the all the social services in the country. It's a legislation that's under review at the moment. It's been under review for the last 4 years, I think now. COVID slowed it down, and new government last autumn slowed it down even further, because there are changes to be made that the new government with a different perspective wants to bring in. Our municipalities, I think it's important to say as well, are self-governing with local politicians, and that also is an area sort of can be an area of challenges as well. As in the report that has been produced, that's going to be released today, you can see that social services in Sweden is also sort of a complex system. It's got a very broad spectrum. It includes financial assistance, child protection, there's both voluntary and compulsory components in it. There is sort of residential care services, and also social care is a big part of it. So it's a broad area. And what we've realized in Sweden through the last number of years is that the question is no longer if we're going to have digitalization, but more a question of how. And digitalization has become, given the wide range of interventions and populations that we cover, digitalization needs to be introduced in different forms. And it might vary from sort of planning tools, decision-making tools, digital devices in the home to assist continued living in the community. But the important thing is that it's also seen, it's a part of the development of social services. I think nowadays, any changes that are made, there's always a digitalized component in there. And what are the challenges that we see? I think some of the challenges have already been mentioned and have similar concerns as were presented from Germany. Social services, and in particular social care that's provided for the elderly and disabled people, is at risk because of the difficulties with the workforce, the lack of a sufficient workforce, in one case, lack of trained workers, and also retention difficulty. Low pay, poor working conditions, increased demand on services through the demographic changes are all causing problems. And on top of this, there's a need for staff to be trained to come into the digitalized form of working. Just a little reflection I had there when this morning I heard on the news that there was the sort of the current unemployment levels were announced, where the total unemployment is 8.8%, 10.6% for young people, and you start realizing that there's a tremendous untapped workforce there somewhere, which we would like to have in social care or have other people coming into social care. But it's just sort of finding the key to making working conditions attractive, and also to, I think, to change the status of care service. Not all service users are ready for digitalization. There are vulnerable populations that can lack access to digital infrastructure, and they need more support. And that's why we also try to focus on the digital gap, to be always aware that we have to be respectful of different groups, vulnerable groups, where maybe we have to go in with other types of intervention there. A lot of municipalities have sort of started using digital coaches to support both elderly people with disabilities and others who lack digital knowledge. And these coaches are also needed to increase the digital maturity in staff. We also find that the legislation which surrounds the handling of data is complicated. Not least of all because there are so many different, there's laws, the rules, regulations govern it. and to influence and change this has proved to be very difficult. Certain aspects of legislation have not kept up pace or been amended to accommodate for digital interventions, not least of all for interventions that use artificial intelligence. To some extent, we can influence the legislation nationally, but a large part of it is also can be determined at the EU level. So there we're sort of looking for support from EU level as far as legislation about data is concerned. And another difficulty, a challenge, is the different systems. Different systems within our own municipalities, different systems if we want maybe to try to integrate with other services or with private users, non-profit users. There's a huge challenge in that respect. One of the we consider that there's a lack of we see that there's a lack of a national strategy for digitalisation, and that's needed to ensure that equal access to services can be attained for all population. But there are certain actors who are sort of providing a great deal of help in coordinating services, and one of these is the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions, called SALA, which is an employer organization, and they are often used by having agreements with, for instance, the government. They've just come out of a 3-year agreement to support digital services for the elderly. And this means that they are able to both finance, exchange good examples, and coordinate development. And there are a number of municipalities also that were received economic help to be model municipalities. This type of coordination we see is necessary because so many municipalities are too small in size to develop their own services. So it's needed this type of coordination. Unfortunately, the agreement that I'm talking about, it expired in 2022. But SALA is still retaining a competence centre which works to provide advice, support and guidance and expertise to municipalities to continue with their digitalised journey. Another example about sort of the need to have to coordinate is in a region in the west of Sweden called the Västra Götaland region. And there are 49 different municipalities there, plus the health region, and also private care providers have coordinated their purchase of digital aids there. And this project looks at providing uniform form of digital aids to people living in the area. And they've established a joint assistive technology centre, which I think it's good examples of how this coordination can help the service users.
Graham, just to let you know that you have 3 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Examples, just a few examples of digitalisation. I mean, it's the different population groups. The elderly, very much aimed at increasing the possibility of still living at home. Digital night rounds, personal alarms with GPS functions, digital medicine dispensers, robot vacuum cleaners, virtual reality goggles, etc. Things to use to increase the possibility of people, both elderly and disabled, to be still in their in-home environments. Parents are using more, been offered interactive digital tools where they can develop parent skills. There's also a tool called Cooperation After Divorce that's been rolled out, which allows parents who are separating to have a form of training which ultimately helps children get through the trauma of a separation there. Because COVID saw the rise of digital meetings, it also saw the rise of chat functions, which have continued, and especially to children, young people who are looking for advice and support. It's a favorable way of contacting social services. Alcohol treatment, there are mobile apps that are used to help with people with alcohol misuse, which is also one of the responsibilities of social services. I guess I got about 30 seconds left, yeah. The recommendations. We have seen a lot of positive aspects in the recommendations. I'll just highlight a couple. Hopefully I'll be given time here. The concept of price quality ratio when commissioning, we think that's very important, and also the use of being able to use service users and families in the commissioning cycle. It's a good recommendation. Quality of social services. The proposal talks about clear targets and benchmarks in the context of the European Pillar of Social Rights. We see that there's a lot of room for development in the European Pillar of Social Rights, especially in our country, but it's good that clear targets are suggested there. Recruitment, retention, training, also excellent recommendations there. And in the area of digitalisation, there's a recommendation about a specific national body, and we think that that is definitely a way forward by having a national coordination in that area. Okay, did I keep my time?
Great, perfectly on time. Thank you so much. Sorry,
Okay.
I was chasing you a little bit.
No.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting input as well. It's great to get this overview and also to get an understanding of how widely digitalization is affecting social services for the good, but also the challenges that go with it. And also from a perspective of Eurodiaconia, I was working a lot also with vulnerable groups. I was very glad to see that you're also concerned about the digital gap and aware that maybe some groups need some additional support. So yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. I think we'll move straight on to our next speakers, and we'll have then, once we have heard everyone, we'll have some time for questions and discussion. We have sort of a second panel now after having heard the experiences from the ground. I would like now to turn to our speakers from the high-level group on the future of the welfare state and from the European Commission. We have asked both our speakers to give their views on the role of social services for the future of the welfare state, and also to share some thoughts and reactions to our recommendations. Therefore, I have the honor to first introduce Professor Joseph Pacolet, who is a member of the high-level group on the future of the welfare state, and who will give us a brief overview of the recently published report. We heard about it before already. Furthermore, he's going to expose what is needed so that social services can best contribute to the future of the welfare state. Professor Pacolet is Emeritus Professor with formal duties in the Social and Economic Policy and Social Inclusion Unit of the Research Institute for Work and Society of the Catholic University of Leuven. And as an economist, he is involved in the study of the relation between economics, demography, and social protection at national and European level. And he has been involved in various studies on social protection at the European level. In November 2021, he has been nominated by DG Employment as member of the high-level group of experts on the future of social protection and of the welfare state. And I'm very glad that you can be with us, Professor Pacolet, and thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, if I may ask you to also please stick to the 15 minutes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for allowing me to share the results of our activities as a high-level group, but especially also to enjoy your reflections and additional recommendations on the future of the welfare state. I must say that our report is a strong confirmation of the present role of the welfare state and how to guarantee it for the future. But at the same time, it provides also a strong argumentation to enlarge it, to renew it, but asking for additional investments in enabling all generations to start strong, to remain strong during the active age, but also to remain strong also as an older person at a certain moment becoming dependent. And I must admit, listening to the service-oriented narrative up until now in this afternoon session, that our report is very much population-centered. But that is not at all in contradiction, because I know that all social services are patient-oriented or client-oriented, so the citizen is in the core of their concerns. I'm very happy that after my speech, Dana will be there, because I listened already to so many expectations to the European level, that it's better that she, back to sender, I would say, that she answers to those expectations. It is, as a matter of fact, a strong support, and even after 8 minutes already, there was a complaint about the lack of financing for the social service. I think one of the benefits of our report will certainly be that there is a prospect possibility to support, to reassure the sustainability of the financing also of the welfare state, including the very traditional social services, but also very new services. I hope I can share with you now my small PowerPoint presentation. I will try to do that from here, and normally it should be, well, from the very beginning. You can see my PowerPoint.
Yes,
and it's well, this is our famous high-level group, 11 experts and the chair of Anna Diamantopoulou. But in the next slide already, and you see here Dana, it's substantially supported by the European Commission, by DG Employment themselves. And by the way, I'm very happy that the next speaker is indeed the European Commission, because to lead forward the recommendations and the implementation and the expectations, to answer the expectations, we need for sure not a high-level group, but we need DG Employment and the European Commission. Indeed, our role was to reflect on how substantial megatrends, and the most substantial is demographic change, the aging of the population, within all other challenges that we could encounter, including war and including even the increase of inflation. The most important, certainly also when you listen and read how economists look to the challenge of an aging population, demography remains a major one, and how it is influencing the present and future design and scope of social protection, and how to finance, especially, that was at the core of our activities. At the core of our activities was also that, and our chairperson didn't like my using of that expression, but it is from cradle to grave, from the very early beginning of life up until the very old age dependency, that we want to reassure a decent living condition. Flourishing is a word that has been used at the end of our report during all the life courses during from early and family life up until the very end, implies also that all generations are included in the social protection we are talking about, and this within 3 possible pillars of welfare protection: the labor market itself, the economy, how it is organized, the traditional social protection system, social insurance, benefit, replacement income, but also, and for me, they are very old, the social services, our healthcare, long-term care, all kinds of in-kind provision of welfare state came at the core of our attention during our activities. I must even expect that I was happily surprised that there was so much support for it, including, and you will read it, you have read it already perhaps in the recommendation, including the role also of the non-profit organizations in public or private non-profit in the provision of services. How to guarantee those services of high quality, that is depending to a large extent to the financing of it. And so we paid a lot of attention to how we can not only realize by investing in people from the very beginning during the complete life course in all the total population that includes the female workforce population, the migrant population. So by investing them to be in work, to be productive in work, they are contributing to the financing at the same time of their own social protection, but also the financing of social protection of those in need. But beyond the ambition of what is already existing in the services, and I must admit what I've been told this previous 1 hour is already very ambitious all the time, also referring, for instance, to the upgrading, upskilling, improving labor conditions of the workforce in the social services. This will imply additional funding for sure. For many countries also just to cope with the European average or to cope with the best performant countries in Europe need additional funding. But on top of that, there has been a lot of creativity, and I'm sure that the service providers themselves are thinking there are much more activities to be developed to support the inclusion of a population, to guarantee provision of care of high quality. So on top of additional needs, just financing already the traditional needs, the existing needs require more funding. And I think we open many possible ways. They need to be tapped to find additional funding for the future of the welfare state. The main activities, and I must now change the picture of myself and some of the people around the table, is that we first of all highlighted the importance of not forgetting that we must believe in a social investment approach, so supporting the people to start strong. That starts with early childcare, that goes on during the education scheme, but also at the system, but also at the end of the education system, you need to support people for the early start in their career, the early start, the good start in their family creation. So that needs social investment, but there needs also to be the belief that this social investment can provide a return on investment. For sure, it will result, and that's the second point, to increased labor market participation. We are all the time, and when I'm listening to the stories about work shortages, and our Swedish colleague just was making the comment, observing unemployment rates that are still high in even Sweden. So we should participate in we should stimulate further increased labor market participation. That implies working more, working longer, working better, in better working conditions, better productivity, combining private life and work, including decent social protection. Those are general observations we made in the report, but they go also for the non-profit sector, for the service providers in this sector. So all the time, the concern about labor condition and quality, what is of relevance for the care sector or the service sector, social services sector, is of relevance for the total economy. That implies to improve that the increasing financial needs, as I already mentioned, part of it is the double dividend that participating more in the labor market will contribute to the financing of the state, of the welfare state, and at the same time will reduce the benefit earners, so it will facilitate the financing of new needs. At the same time, it needs adaptation and expansion in many countries. We must at the same time also, and I very appreciate the word that has been used, price quality as a point of concern for the service providers. So we need to improve efficiency, but at the same time guarantee fairness in the financing. We need to improve the labor market participation by permanent investment in people, ensuring upskilling and lifelong learning to confront industrial change, old industries that will disappear, new industries that will expand. And I, for many years did manpower planning, analyze future forecasting of how the needs for the care sector might evolve. For me, the care sector, social services are the sector of the future. So organizing the transition to those new activities, to those new industries is also a part of upskilling and lifelong learning. Remarkable was that
interrupt, just to highlight that you also have 2 minutes left.
Yes, important was also that the social services emerged as an important characteristic of the welfare state, and so to further development, and including also the involvement of the non-profit and social economy organizations, was a very remarkable end conclusion, but a very supportive conclusion for the service providers themselves. And finally, it was also a characteristic of our report, and it should be used as such, that we are broadening the ambition of the welfare state. It is not only about monetary compensation or income reassurance, but it is also about actively supporting human flourishing and well-being. And those ideas are reflected in the 21 recommendations, and 2 of them are especially of importance: ensuring equitable and high quality long-term care provision. When you read that carefully, and each word has been discussed during our activities, it is a guarantee for the future to develop decent, of high quality in all the countries of long-term care insurance. And the other explicit recommendation is ensuring inclusive service provision that is supporting well-being, and also the capabilities, the capacities of a population from the very beginning up until the very last moment. And if you read those, at least when I read those again and again, those recommendations, it is, I think, also a challenge and an invitation to the service providers themselves. So guaranteeing high quality implies that they should include the dependency needs, the reinforcement, the capacitating is the word that has been used in our report, to support the capacities and the empowerment and the independence independency of their clients, their users themselves. I gave many other ideas that not so explicitly, implicitly are all the time supporting the further development of the social services. So I think it must be a very optimistic, a very potential, high potential report that you have in hand to support your own recommendations. I thank you for.
Thank you so much, and thank you as well for your efforts to stick to the time so that we can have also some exchange afterwards. I think it's really good to see your report, and thank you for highlighting all those very relevant and interesting points. And indeed, it is very close to what we have been advocating for and what our members say from the ground. It's really good to see that our views converge so much. And as regards the social service providers, at least I think those represented here for sure are very eager to provide the best possible quality services and to empower their users. So there we're for sure on the same line. Having said this, you have already said it. We are going to hear now from Mrs. Dana Bachmann from the European Commission. And thank you very much as well for being with us today. And after everything that has been said and all the recommendations done to the Commission, it's always a bit of a difficult but very interesting task, I think, to come in at this point. Ms. Bachmann, you're currently head of the unit working on social protection and DG employment. This unit is responsible for social protection questions, including access to social protection, but also adequacy of pensions and long-term care. Prior to this, you were head of unit in DG employment and DG EAC, responsible for vocational education and training, apprenticeships and adult learning. And there you also coordinated the work around a number of initiatives, including on social protection and long-term care, as well as the 2016 and 2020 skills agenda. Ms. Bachmann, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. We are very interested to hear from your side what your reflections are on the high-level group report, but also your reactions on our recommendations and how the current work of the Commission can help addressing some of the challenges that have been highlighted. So please, you have the floor, and I will also ask you to stick to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For a change, I won't have a PowerPoint, and just to say I'm very happy to be here with you, and also it was really interesting to listen not only to the recommendations but also to the feedback coming from the organizations on the ground. So lots of ideas that I picked up from those presentations. I will cover 3 points in my intervention. Firstly, really, the place of social services within the welfare system. Secondly, I will also try to highlight how much, when implementing the care strategy, actually we can make lots of way forward on many of the recommendations you put forward in your report with regards to social services. And then at the end, I will have also a few reflections on the issues I heard so far. So now coming with the first item I wanted to touch upon, it's really to reconfirm that social services, in the way we design initiatives, social policy initiatives at European level, but also as it came out clearly from the high-level group report, are a cornerstone of a welfare system, that there is no future welfare system without very, very strong social services and with a much broader understanding than we have had so far. Because, Joseph also mentioned in the high-level group, it goes beyond education, childcare, long-term care, healthcare, but also looking at housing issues, also access to public transport, in a way dealing with the fair transition and accessibility issues. To give you a few illustrations, we have a number of policy and legislative initiatives that we put forward. I'm thinking of the child guarantee, but also the revision of the Barcelona targets, minimum income recommendations, where obviously all of those to be essential, they require intervention of social services. And I think when member states take actions towards implementation, it will be only natural that they will reinforce social services. I'm also thinking on regards to all the actions underpinning the disability, the EU strategy on the rights of people with disabilities, also within the education and skills area. And here I'm talking about support for needs, young people not in employment, education and training, but also counseling, guidance services, and also adult education, bringing in my old hat, which are very much also reliant on services. Second point I wanted to touch upon is the care strategy and how actually many of the actions that we are unrolling and that member states are expected to unroll also in implementing the Council recommendation on long-term care are very synergetic with the scope of your recommendations. You would have noticed that both in the Commission communication on the care strategy, but also in the Council recommendation, we have provisions with regards to public procurement, also encouraging that there are rules linked to the quality of the services to be provided. And of course, here within the Commission, there is scope for supporting better use or better dissemination of the guidance that has been issued in 2021 on socially responsible public procurement, and maybe even putting more focus on public procurement in the care sector, because I went quickly straight just before joining the meeting, and I see lots of focus more on procuring ICT and kind of more goods than services as such. Now, social innovation, I think it came very clearly in your recommendation and also linked to integrated service provision. That's very much at the core both of the communication, the care strategy and the Council recommendation. And I wanted to mention that we already had a flagship call under the technical support instruments, so really targeted towards member states in helping them promote, design or reform systems so that they provide integrated care services. We were very happy to see that there was a high demand for this flagship, and in the coming period, there will be a number of 6 or 7 projects that will start really being demand driven from the countries themselves. Also, maybe some of the organizations present are involved in the social innovation calls that we financed under past funding opportunity, which we will also try to bring together towards the end of this year as they come to their successful completion, precisely because we don't want these projects to finish and to end like this, but because we think there is potential to disseminate and to exchange a bit on lessons to be learned and maybe possibilities for scaling up or adapting to other contexts. Quality of services, I think it also came very clearly in your recommendation, and this is a key at the center of the care strategy and also the Council recommendation. Obviously, especially with the Council recommendation, where member states are invited to have a quality framework for long-term care, to apply it both to public and private providers, to enforce it, to use co-production mechanisms, and also the Council recommendation has an annex which is inspired also by the voluntary quality framework for social services, but adapted to the long-term care services. On the issue of the workforce, I will have most things to say because I think it also came very a lot in your interventions. And here there are really many dimensions. So there is the dimension of the working conditions. And one of the first actions, which actually already started under the care strategy, is to have a review of how the EU labor law acquis is applied in the sector. Also, looking into the specific situation of domestic workers, live-in carers, so kind of the most fragile people within the workforce. In parallel, EU OSHA agency is also doing a very thorough review of the health and safety and work acquis in care and in the healthcare sector. And we hope that once the results of this work will come together, we can have a more in-depth discussion with all stakeholders in terms of what could be avenues for the future. There is also the skills dimension, and we know that there are a number of organizations that are interested in and already cooperating under different Erasmus actions. Also, there is a dialogue around the Pact for Skills that is being ongoing. There is also the dimension of the digital skills for the care workforce, and here lots of actions that could contribute to this under Erasmus, but also as part of the European Year for Skills, and also within the digital and Horizon Europe programs. And I think the German colleagues also mentioned very much the issue of legal migration. So I'm happy to say that to get DG Home leading, but also us supporting them, soon they will start the study on reviewing the admission conditions for third country nationals to the sector. And the care sector comes really very much on top of the discussions in all the follow-up to the skills and talents package of the Commission. So in terms of facilitating talent pools and talent partnerships with third countries. And the care sector always pops up as a priority sector. Also, there is this year there will be a new initiative on recognition of qualifications of third country nationals, and obviously this should also help in a way with recognizing not only qualifications but also skills for people moving to Europe for work. Also, with regards to workforce, there is the issue of social dialogue, because we really think that it's important that there is a strong social dialogue, because that would also lead to better working conditions, better pay. And you would know that there is a request for the setup of a sectoral social dialogue for social services, and discussions between social partners are ongoing as to the composition. On digitalization, I would say this is, again, very well reflected in the care strategy, and we work very closely with Connect to try to link the different actions that they have and the programs they are managing, and put them better to the use of the care sector. And one of the actions actually is also trying to bring together all the results of various projects in terms of applying different digital solutions to the care sector, and bringing together local authorities, care providers, all the institutions and people in the care ecosystems to try to see how to best step on those opportunities. And here there is scope for better evaluating the impact of different digital solutions and feeding this to the policy options. Now, I will stop here because probably I already said a lot. I just wanted to alert you that there will be a Eurofound report coming up on social services during COVID, also looking at the financing dimensions. I assume that maybe some of you contributed with some interviews during the making. And from the discussions I heard so far, I really take the point on digitalization. And I think this is something that was discussed in the high-level group also it comes out times and again whenever we talk about the care sector, of the need, to look at the opportunities, but also what are the risks and how to best accompany users and carers in developing the digital skills and not leaving anyone behind. Really excellent point that was made on the need to ensure more agility in the care system and the possibility to react at national level, basically, when there are risk situations, but also for the EU to activate the given flexibility with regards to fiscal or aid rules. And that was something that came very clearly in the high-level group report, that we need more reactions like the COVID-19 reactions and less like reactions from the past. And also in the Council recommendation on long-term care, actually, there is a provision inviting member states to develop contingency plan and to really try to take better care of this capacity to react to unforeseen situations. And then I would end by saying that social services really are spanning across so many policy areas, and it requires both at EU national level this whole of government approach, and there is a dimension linked to competitiveness, single market functioning, state aid, fiscal sustainability, very important, but also, how to have a consistent approach between social services for different, let's say, target groups, integration of the services, linked to good public administration, digitalisation policies, and so forth. And my last point, it's about the high-level group and the expectations on the Commission. And here I would also say that indeed we see that there are lots of expectations on the Commission from the stakeholders with regards to the follow-up on the high-level group. On the other hand, you will see that the core of the recommendations in the high-level group are actually very much directed to the national level and to what member states and also social partners should activate to do. In many cases, very synergetic with initiatives under the pillar of social rights. Of course, we are here ready to support processes, but also, trying to keep a bit let's say, a realistic approach to how much Commission can follow up on all the recommendations of the high-level group. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Dana, for those insights and for your reactions to our recommendation. Thank you for having taken the time to give them such a close look and consideration. Having heard from so many different sides, I think now it's the time to open the floor for any questions or comments. We are although our speakers have been sticking to time, I realized that I've been taking some time, so I'm sorry for that, but we will just have time for a few questions so that we can at the end also hear the reactions of Heather and Alfonso. But I open the floor. If you want to speak, as I said before, please raise the virtual hand and our comms colleagues will give you the floor, or otherwise you have the Q&A box where you can put written questions. Heather, I see your hand, but I'll still wait a second if there's anything coming from our participants. There seems to be nothing so far, so Heather, let's start and then we'll see if other questions come in.
Maybe I can kick off with a question, and maybe it'll either inspire or others will decide that there's better questions. It's particularly a question to Dana Bachmann, but also to our professor from the high-level group. You were able to identify the very clear two recommendations in the report of the high-level group on the welfare state that have a particular interest for social services. But I was also particularly interested on page 4 of the report. There is also a recommendation of having a golden rule of public finances. to ensure that future EU fiscal governance needs to ensure social protection and especially social investment needs. And I find this is very timely, given that the Council today has also agreed its new economic governance framework. And I think, as Ms. Bachmann said, there is an incredible overlap really needed between a number of different areas, one of which is economic policy and economic governance, and indeed employment and social affairs policies, and specifically social services. And I just really wanted to ask, perhaps slightly cheekily, but how realistic do you believe that there could be a trajectory, not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but some form of trajectory towards having such a golden rule of public finances? And how do you match this up with the ambition that you have with the long-term care strategy? Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to answer first? Ms. Bachmann, should I give you maybe the floor?
Yeah, I mean, so I think in terms of how realistic, maybe I would also highlight it, and Joseph can complement it. That was a very intense discussion that we have witnessed in the reflections on the report. And I think the experts were also aware, when putting it on the table, that in parallel there was a process at another level in terms of reviewing the economic framework, and that the golden rule was not on the table for that discussion. Now, I would also say that it also depends a bit on the political will of some member states to put that discussion again on the table, either now or later on. And a first discussion at political level on the high-level group report will take place in EBSCO beginning of May. So it will be also quite interesting to see, you know, how ministers position themselves vis-a-vis this proposal of the high-level group, and if they also envisage to give some political mandate or a political message for carrying on the discussion. And then I would also say, because yeah, in the past weeks, members of the high-level group presented a report to SPC, EPC, and the MCO committees, and this issue comes, the question about follow-up comes up quite a lot in those discussions. And I think it's very much acknowledged that, yes, it's an issue that the members of the high-level group wanted to put on the table. They were aware that it may not be so easily feasible, and also that there are even within, let's say, very strong social oriented schools of thought. There are some I wouldn't say concerns, but yeah, it's not so straightforward in terms of how to put in practice such a golden rule, how to define what is eligible, what is not eligible, and risking to create a bit of competition between different types of social investments. And here, I'm sure Joseph will say much more than me.
Well, indeed, we had a long, intense discussion about it, and we finalized in a realistic phrasing of our recommendation on a golden rule, because we thought that indeed there was a consensus about introducing such a rule, but that consensus is certainly not the case in the European Commission themselves, within those minds that need to decide how the future economic governance should look like. So the minimal, that is indeed a real need of many social service providers, be it residential for sure, but certainly also other types of provision. There is a package of investment waiting there, and public authorities are confronted with not being able because of their deficits, but possibly. So there is a need to add to those financing possibilities, at least for investments in real brick and mortar. In the discussions of our group, we were reflecting on many other kinds of social investment in people in the end, but that's in the end also the role of all social spending. So, but investing in at least the real brick and mortar infrastructure and other infrastructure should be feasible with applying a golden rule. We do hope that putting it on the table, it will shift the minds of all, and it has been for sure welcomed by many, and so also by you, Peter Roy. It's welcome. So it should continue to repeat that there is some consensus between a lot of economists, at least also.
Thank you very much. I see that there is one question that came just from the audience. I also see, Friederike, that you have a question. Maybe I will read the one from the audience, which concerns the gap between northern and southern, western and eastern member states, and how this gap can be bridged by the EU. But I suggest that we also quickly, very briefly, hear Friederike's question, and maybe we can take them together and then move on to the conclusions.
Yes, thank you very much. My question is always, I think, quite near to the question from the audience. And I would like to go back to this, what you have addressed, Joseph, about the golden rule. Because in Germany, what we face just now is the German federal government has set a very stiff agenda to get the whole of Germany emission-free within the next, say, 15 years or so. And Diaconia has said we want to be emission-free by 2035. But that means there's lots of investment to be made in order to refurbish our real estate. And so our question is, of course, how can we introduce this very important issue, which is important for the whole Commonwealth, into the right financing of our social work? And our idea is goes to the direction to say, can we implement the idea of sustainability in our social law, so that investing on ecologic building can be made relevant for the question of how to refinance social work. In the end, we all profit by it. But so far, there is no point of consideration for refinancing social work.
Thank you, Friederike. It risks opening up a very wide debate, but if someone would like to at least start giving a brief answer.
Well, if I can react again, the need of investment is for many other roles than only social protection and investment in the social services infrastructure. There are other challenges and we even include them from time to time to the infrastructure that is also relevant for the total population, public urban transport, for instance, adaptation of the environment, of the urban infrastructure. All needs for further and additional investment. So by allowing such a golden rule for all kind of real investment should facilitate the rest of the public budget to facilitate, to fund, to finance the rest of the social protection. So it helps the public finance in any way. And it helps perhaps also directly because I can really recall many debates in our own country about the need for the social service providers to invest in additional infrastructure. The same goes, by the way, by also an education system, a training system, urban transport, and so on.
Thank you. Dana, can I give you the floor to respond? And also, if you could mention the east-west, north-south divide, that would be.
Yeah, I see Alfonso also had his hand up before me, so I don't know.
Alfonso, is it okay if I give you the floor when you are doing the general wrap-up?
Yes, but I wanted to comment on something very briefly in relation to the financing, because I would like to caution against the question of just wanting more money. I really think it's very important about what do we use the money for. I'd like to caution against the idea of brick and mortar only. Social services are very complex. I can understand, of course, that we need to invest, let's say, in housing, when we realize that we have a housing need. But for instance, now we are supporting people in very different ways. And certainly we are supporting more and more people in their own communities, in their own homes. And therefore we ought to look at different types of investments. It's not just about needing more money, but how we are using this money, and particularly supporting into new ways in which we help people and communities, in which we put in place new jobs, new professional roles, and also the fact that we are supporting more and more, or we should be, also people in their own homes.
Thank you.
And we are certainly not using enough.
Sorry, but we're really running out of time. Can we have this please ordered? Dana, I would really like to give you 2 minutes to react, and please also on the east-west divide and north-south. And then I would like to hand over to Heather and Alfonso for some concluding remarks. Thank you very much.
Okay, so maybe on the divide, I would say that obviously funding helps a lot, because that's why we have cohesion funds, and in order to bridge those gaps between different regions. Also trying to bring together, fostering the exchanges between countries, because we see, of course, that countries are interesting, and even regions, to learn from each other and to see how to move from benefits to in-kind services, or how to better combine the two. When I look at the long-term care, obviously also coming from Romania, I see that there is lots of scope and interest, and actually there is a necessity for countries in Eastern Europe to expand the capacity of their services, and it will be an inherent development, because otherwise there will be a huge social crisis if those services will not be developed to be there. There is the example of the childcare services, which have expanded, and there has been, let's say, a huge convergence over the past years in expanding those services. So in implementing long-term care, childcare, minimum income recommendations, I think there will also be much stronger convergence in terms of social services. On the funding side, my only comment is to really very much agree and echo Alfonso's comments of how to combine investments in infrastructure with investments in actually services, and the two should go hand in hand. And then there was a question from the German colleague, how to tap, to link support for social services to support for the green transition. And I think I wanted to remind everyone that there is the Social Climate Fund that has been set up precisely to accompany the green transition, and each country will need to develop I think they are called national social climate plans. And the idea is also to cover indeed the most vulnerable households, but also services. And we've seen in RRF, because there was a strong focus put on digital and green transitions, and actually most of the investments on long-term care, on social protection, were coming a bit through this angle: how to refurbish social care infrastructure to make it energy efficient, and on social protection, how to digitalize social protection management and public administration. So sometimes when you don't have dedicated funding for social services, you can use these other avenues, and we've seen that actually member states have used it a lot. As such. So I stop here.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. And I'm sorry I had to cut you short, but there is so much to discuss on this topic, and so many interesting persons today are united. I hope we can continue this work and discussion over the next month and years, because it will for sure stay a burning question. And now I would like to hand over to Heather, and followed by Alfonso for some concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very difficult to conclude 2 hours of very rich.
Okay, so this is not working.
And that's why when we talk about financing, we're talking about financing for quality. When we're talking about investment, we're talking about investment in quality. And there are many different ways and types of services that need that. I think the other thing I would stress is that listening, and particularly to our colleague from Sweden, was reminding me that when we talk about social services, we're not only talking about long-term care. And there is a danger at the moment, because we have seen a political policy direction go towards long-term care because of the mega trend of demographic change, that there is a potential danger that we leave behind some of the other types of social services, particularly those assisting people to work, assisting those with long-term, perhaps addictions, and a number of things that have been mentioned today. So our recommendations from ESN and from Eurodiaconia look to go across the broad spectrum of social services and their use. And we want to reiterate that message that social services are more than long-term care. And whereas we very much support the work now on long-term care, we also need to start work on other types of social service as well, because we want quality for everybody. We want to see the best use of EU and national funding to achieve that. And we remain, certainly I can say as Eurodiaconia, a very keen and I think active partner with the European Commission, and through our members, very active partners at national level, to ensure that quality is what drives the provision of social services. Our recommendations that we presented today show the areas that need to change in order to achieve that goal. There are changes needed in public procurement strategies that we could have another 2 hours on. There are changes needed in what we regard as being quality as well as how we use and make the best use of tools such as digitalisation. But I will stop there. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us. Thank you to all of you who have been involved from both Eurodiaconia and ESN in putting this together, and to all our speakers. And Alfonso, I'm sure, will give you another thanks as I pass over to him for his final remarks as well. And actually, thank you to ESN from Eurodiaconia for being ready to do this partnership together.
Great. Well, thank you, Heather, and thanks to everyone who's been here for this past couple of hours. It's great, of course, working with Eurodiaconia and working with other colleagues, but certainly it's been a really nice cooperation. And we, of course, will continue to cooperate with each other, because this is how it should be. And if you allow me to, as I did at the start, I'd like to conclude with 3 key points. There are many more, as Heather was saying, but we need to somehow, reduce it to some key points to take for the next months. As we were saying, this is about guaranteeing the quality, the coverage and the quality of social services. And indeed, this is a key concept, but in social services is relatively new. I mean, contracting for quality was one of the first reports at European level produced by ESN in 2010. And it was also then when the Commission launched the set of principles in social services quality. But as we've been saying, the system of provision is complex, and it is underpinned by procurement procurement, by contracting rules. And of course, this has led to a number of situations where in countries there has been a higher weight from the price and less attention to quality, also coupled with the significant underinvestment over the past years. And when I talk about underinvestment, I refer to both a lack of money, but also where we place the money. And it is therefore key that public authorities are supported to rebalance those two components, because this will impact positively on service provision and the providers who provide those services, on the front line. And of course, the European Commission can play a very important role working with national governments to recast the 2010 voluntary framework for social services, because social services are broad, includes child protection, family support, support for people with disabilities, homeless and older people. And central to this recast should be a refocus on of the framework principles on the importance of commissioning services based on outcomes and procurement of social services, which are guided by indicators that concentrate on improving people's lives. And linked to this, the second point is having a strategy on the social services workforce, which should be part of a wider implementation of the care strategy. And it certainly should include adequate remuneration, but not only, it should also refer to training, to supporting recruitment and retention, to career progression, and at European level to work towards mutual recognition of qualifications across countries. As has been said earlier on, I think it was Graham who said, it's not about the if, it is about how will digitalisation, whether it's data usage for decision-making, whether it's service improvement, whether it's assistive technologies, will support coverage, quality, and affordability in social services. And this is because, this is why this year's 31st European Social Services Conference, we will specifically focus on this theme in cooperation with the Swedish presidency of the EU. And finally, the third point, financing. Financing, let's look at financing as an incentive to promote a new model of care, which must ensure that everyone has a guarantee to care and support so they can all access care when they need it at critical situations in their lives. And this is essential to switch to a model of care which is based on the family, the home, and the community. And for this, we ought to bring it all together: the policies, the services, the professionals, the technology, the standards of quality, the ethics, cooperation across different governance levels, and services coordination. With this, I hope we'll be working on this over the next months and years. And I'd like to thank you all for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon. Bye.